we are today joined by a very special guest whose I think political journey has sparked great interest and discussion beyond Thailand. Mr. Pita Limjaruna, thank you for joining us here.
Thank you very much for having me.
I think the best way to introduce Mr. Pita, although everybody have already known, these three things I quoted from you, from your recent words, so I didn't make it up. First, Prime Minister candidate. Second, election winner. And third is the post-parliamentarian.
Yes, or in a word, in America, they call me Prime Minister 29.5. So 29.5 is it's one shorter sentence than what you said just now. But people's choice and parliamentary chaos, that's me.
Exactly. But I think the rest of the stories behind those three words, I think it's only fair if I give the floor to you to briefly introduce not just who you are, but what you are right now. What are you currently working on, and why did you end up? How did you end up here in Jakarta?
Yes, I'm currently a visiting fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School, where I focus on grooming next generation leaders in Boston area. I also have a lot of students from Indonesia during my office hours to come and try to use me as a pathway to politics. More than Thai students, probably Indonesians, Filipinos, and then Thais, some from Japan, some from Colombia, and things like that. And usually the questions that I get from the Indonesian students would be how to start a political party. Number two would be how much would it cost to run for public office. So then that brought some intellectual curiosity, and made me wanted to come back to Jakarta once again. Before that, I was in politics, and before that, I was working for a management consulting company. So I had a chance to work with your energy companies like Pertamina and Permata Bank and all that. But that was 20 years ago when I was, in my early working areas, where I know a bit about your potential and your foundation as ASEAN #1. So because of all that, then I felt like if I had a chance to come back to Southeast Asia again, with the current situation of the great power rivalry, and when the regional unity is at most critical, ASEAN #2 and ASEAN #1 should finally get back together and start thinking about what we have in common. So that's the reason why I'm here at the moment. I'm on a political pause, so they deposed me and put a 10-year ban on my political journey. That means I have 9 more years to burn. Hopefully I get to come back here at PCI once again and join you guys. Thank you.
Okay, so my first question, Mr. Pita, you're talking to about 100 here, maybe 100 people who are most likely probably 10 or 15 years younger than you. And
Thank you very
more,
much.
right?
I feel very good, but keep going.
Right, and they are coming from civil society background. Some are from universities, some are from youth communities and some movements. Some even might be in the ministries as public servants. But you had the experience, long, deep experience of leading this strong and successful campaign, actually. And what did you learn for the past years in between how to hold on to your ideals on one hand, on the other hand, having to game up your compromise game as well, and pragmatism on the other hand, for you to win the election?
Okay, so that was a 2-part question. The first question was about the lesson learned from the campaign. And then the second part, she was trying to frame between idealism and pragmatism. So we have to slice and dice it and answer it one by one. What I learned from the campaign is resilience and radical optimism. I learned firsthand that democracy, politics is a long game, and any long game requires patience and strategy. So if that's the case, I have internalized it that it's not going to put me down or make me crumble. I would spend the time that was given to me, this 10-year pause, as the time for me to groom next-gen leaders in ASEAN, for me to build my own knowledge and build up the network, groom the global Thai talent, so that when I return, I would become a better prime ministerial candidate, more vigorous, more capable, and stronger at the time. The second part of your question was trying to think of idealism and pragmatism as a tug of war. But I would disagree on that. I mean, the reason why we won the election was that we were pragmatic reformist. We were pragmatic idealist, or you can call it idealistic pragmatist. It depends on however you want it. But I would argue that it's not either or question. It's a combination of those. Idealism is not something you give up. It's something you communicate. It's essential, but if you keep it with you without any communication to other people, then yeah, it becomes cynicism, broken idealism. But you have to be both pragmatic as well as idealistic. And the reason why I said that is, yes, I want to reform the country, and I have a first 100-day plan. I have the first year plan. I have the first term plan. I have the 8-year term plan of what I can do and what I cannot do. So I was ready for execution. I was ready for implementation. We prepared 57 legal amendments, documents in order to make it happen. So we were very pragmatic. We weren't just being idealists all the time, and that's about it. But the problem is, in politics, there's idealism and pragmatism, as you asked, but there's transactionalism, and there's survivalism. A lot of politicians is not just stuck between, should I be idealistic but can't get things done, or should I be pragmatic but I have no ideology? But there are politicians all around the world that are transactional or with the survival instinct. I have to do a grand compromise in order for me to survive politically. Otherwise, I don't have a tit versus tat transaction, and that becomes another issue. And I think because of the growing, the third wheel and the fourth wheel, that made a pragmatic reformist or a pragmatic idealist like me out of the political space. So that's how I would answer your first question.
Thank you. That's very strong answer. Mr. Pita, in the era of populism, well, you are a symbol of one who successfully led a reform movement. How do you balance out? Sometimes when you want to push for reform, you need to take unpopular decisions. And how do you manage to also consider the populist needs, if there is any? And what did you learn throughout as well, your campaign and even beyond the campaign?
Well, we definitely have to first give an alternative to populism. Obviously, we were trying to think about it not as an expense when we were trying to help people. We think about it as an investment. We're not thinking about it as OpEx, operational expense. We think about it as a CapEx, capital expenditure, investing in the people. But the negative consequences of doing just the Big Bang reform is that people cannot feel it right away. But if it's economic populism, helicopter money, people get the money right away, but it's not going to be sustainable. So when you do a Big Bang reform, that's why I have my first 100-day agenda or first year agenda, and communicate with the people right away, manage expectation right away, that, I understand your suffering, I understand your concern, I understand your liquidity problem, and here's how I'm going to fix it, short term, medium term, and long term. However, if you just, ignore populism and say it's bad, but you don't have an alternative path for it, obviously people will go for a quick helicopter money, of course, but if you, or agriculture subsidies. But if you think about reform, improving productivity in the midterm and the long term, but you also think backwards, but these are the quick wins. These are the low-hanging fruits. You can get it done on the way to that Big Bang reform. People will be able to understand. Giving you an example, we were champions of land distribution, land rights. If you were a farmer, you could go to a party with the populists and get some agricultural subsidy one time. And once you voted for them, they're gone. But for me, I'm going to help you with something that is very quick as well, but at the same time, land distribution or land justice for you to have that kind of asset to be used as a collateral for you to get into the capitalistic system like any other, like me, like you guys. If you think about it, maybe the Big Bang reform is not so bad. It doesn't take that long in the sense that I have some short-term remedy for you. Then they will think, okay, with one-time subsidy that comes from taxpayers' money is just a distribution of wealth versus improving investment and improving productivity with something short-term that will help you right away. Then people will shine away from economic populism.
Thank you. Mr. Pita, the idea of democracy, when we have a public dissatisfaction on policies, say on economic development, there is a tendency to get an easy conclusion that democracy fails. And then we start to look into some countries not known for liberal democracy like Vietnam, China, for their economic growth and so on. What would you say to the people that think maybe it's the fault of democracy? And what would be your answer to be the bottom line of what a democracy could and could not take? Examples of best practices from abroad.
First of all, there's a thin red line between competitive autocracy and democracy. Just because competitive autocracy is like you're running the country by autocrats that allows election once in a while doesn't make you a democracy. If it's truly democratic, it will not be a straight line. It will be a zigzag. Sometimes it goes here, sometimes it goes here, sometimes it goes back. But it's a self-corrected system that allows, if you voted for the wrong person in 4 years, or even during midterm in some places in 2 years, you could vote again and correct your mistakes. But if you're thinking of, I have elections also, but there's unelected mechanisms to make sure that election outcome and election result is not always the same. Then you have to really draw that line whether you are true democracy or you are competitive autocracy. So it's really up to us, not just going out to voting turnout is really important. The freedom of speech, the freedom of the press, the ability for the people to control the agenda, independent organization that's really independent and not being weaponized or selectively used for a certain family. And that rings a bell somewhere along ASEAN countries in one shot. So yeah, those things are something that are components of a true democracy, and it's very detailed. Devils is in the detail that the younger generations and people who are truly democratic have to be smart and detailed and really followed up on these situations, because as of now, the way you take away democracy is not as loud and it's not as visible. You're not going to see tanks on the street. You're not going to see people being assassinated. Rather, they'll just use the judicial coup, violence in the courtroom, and political assassination rather than what happened in the past. The painful memory that we had together during May in South Korea, in Thailand, and in Indonesia. It's not going to be like that anymore, because autocrats are much smarter and they are very, very detailed. They're very discreet in the way they want to cling on to power. So that's why I feel like coming over here and talking to younger generations as well as Democrats to come up with Democrats United against Autocrats Inc. Because for those autocrats, they're personalized politics, political dynasties that is on text basis. They can always text one another what they want to do with neighboring countries and things like that. But for us, Democrats, it's once in every 20 years we meet, So I feel like I should be traveling and meeting people that are like-minded, how to stop this democratic backsliding around the world as well as here. And I don't want to reinvent the wheel. If something that is great happened in Latin America, then yeah, maybe I want to take whatever happened to Chile and apply it to this region and become a community like how FPCi wanted to do it.
Why do you think this democratic backsliding around the world is happening?
Several reasons. I feel like I quote one of the Harvard professors. I think right after COVID, and then people started to see, uncontrollable unemployment as well as rising cost, and they started to blame it on immigration and starting to blame it on foreigners and things like that, so that people feel really angry. They were following elections, about 19 elections, only 2 incumbents stayed. The remaining of the elections just went to the challenger because people were so angry about it. And also I felt like the conservative parties in many, many countries failed to represent their own people. So once the existing conservative parties cannot represent their own people, that's when the far right ideology starts to come in. And when the economy is really bad and great power rivalry starts to come, and it's very easy to blame someone else, for rising cost of living in Germany, blame international students for rising cost of living in Australia. So that's why you started to see all around the world that the right-wing thinking is starting to arise, and because of many, many combinations, and the world is changing. The better question is, what do we do about it? How do Democrats in America offer an alternative America to what's happening now? How do SDP in Germany offer an alternative Germany? How does my party number 3, because number 2 is already dissolved, number 1 is already dissolved, is proposing an alternative Thailand where it's more inclusive and diversity is an asset and not a liability. Otherwise, they will see, okay, the isolation is better, thinking inward is better. You don't have to think about multipolarity or anything. Just this country first, that country first, and that country first all the time, because that's the new normal of the world nowadays.
You touched upon this before already. The topic of today's discussion is democratic resilience, and one of the topic is the role of civil society. You mentioned before, now the battle is not seeing tanks on the street, and it's mostly in the courtroom, on the legislation table, within the system. And we had that history of 1998 of reform, which Thailand might not have, and still struggling on that. But our part of the story, civil society has always been the strong pillar of Indonesian democracy, and I believe that's also happening in Thailand and many countries. But the challenge is different. It's within the system. We might have this democratic system, but procedural-wise, but implementation-wise, there are many forms of manipulations of the system, institutions, laws are as well weaponized here. Then where civil society can play most effective part?
Civil society is like shock absorber of democracy. Civil society is something that needs to work when the institutions stop working. So without any civil society organization, when a shock happens, democratic resilience, it means a system that can renew itself and can withstand shocks, and then ability to correct itself. That's what resilience in a nutshell mean. And in order for you to absorb the shock of something when it happens, and the ability to provide an informed decision on many issues, and also continuation, because governments come and go, parliaments come and go. But it's a civil society that works on land justice, indigenous rights, gender equality in Thailand, environmental issues. Those are the pillars that provided the shock and shock absorbing, as well as continuation of the struggle of the marginalized people. So without civil society, it will stop when the government change. But it's a civil society that keeps new governments accountable to the real need of the people. So it's truly crucial. But it's a shrinking space in Thailand, though. I don't know about what it is here in Indonesia. I heard about the uprising a couple of times here, about a military law as well as change of local election. Dark Indonesia, I can't remember exactly, but I feel like, it's called the control of the agenda. The ability for people to control the agenda of the society is part of a democracy, and you were successful, but for us, we have that kind of voters fatigue and civil society fatigue that we've tried and tried again, and we went to election and we finally won, and then again, we were stripped away of the victory, and we don't know whether we should wait, and instead of hitting the streets, we should just go to the poll and vote again and bring about change from election. So it's a bit of an iffy situation in Thailand, which I completely understand. It's not easy, especially if it's organic. Obviously, some peaceful assembly can be organized and can be systematically paid for in order for them to show up. But for organic assembly is something that is pretty tiring and dangerous also, which is something I agree that it's part of democracy, but I can't take responsibility for people's lives and things like that. That's why I chose the other path, which is to wait my time out, return better, and win within the parliamentarian system, which might be slower but more sustainable in a way that, yes, I'll keep winning. The first time I got 80, the second time I got 152, next time I'm going to get 200 and 250. If I keep winning gradually, it will eventually reach a pivot point that finally the time of change has come from within. Yeah.
You mentioned civil society fatigue, and I think that might be also happening in Indonesia, although the civil society keep lighting up each other's spirit in some ways, but political cynicism toward politicians and governments is very deep among Indonesian public and even younger generation. You mentioned the hashtag of kabur aja dulu, meaning go abroad, and secondly, Indonesia gelap, the dark Indonesia, and I think it has gotten to a point where this cynicism is towards politicians and government in general. And you in Thailand capture most votes. You earn the trust of the people, and people see that they can rely on you. What would be your answer for the politicians here and the governments here if they ask for your advice how to earn trust from the people?
Consistency and transparency. It's very easy. I mean, if you are consistent with your message, and if you're transparent in your decision, you might not come to the answer right away, but you're very transparent in the way you think and the way you frame your argument, and you're accountable to your words. I feel like that's essentially, the element of trust. Even within a smaller micro institution like families, to companies, to towns or to countries, if you are consistent with the message, if you're transparent with the way you think and how you come about solutions, I think that would be my advice to governments, that they keep the voters informed, and that would be the only way you gain trust. But if there's lack of political integrity and lack of political accountability, that's part of something that you have to live up to the burden of not being trusted by the voters, because you deserve it.
How would you define a good leader in today's era?
As of now, I feel like you have to be a consensus between international politics and domestic politics. You have to be a consensus between the public and private sector. And you have to be the consensus with people who come before you and people who come after you. You have to have humility when praised and the ability to adapt when criticized. But I feel like the world is coming to a new world order, and countries are operating on the old consensus. Old consensus when there's a new normal. So that's why I feel like the leader, or that's actually how I differentiated myself from other candidates also. I tell them, I have some international background, but I also have rural backgrounds in Thailand. I have the ability to speak to the rice growers or the rubber plantation or the SMEs. I also understand the private sector and also the public sector. When the private sector requires regulatory guillotine from the public sector, I understand exactly what they're talking about. If I'm the policy maker, then I understand that this kind of policies, the private sector might not be happy. And then at the age of 44, I'm in the middle of people who have come before me, which I will ask for their experience so that I have the energy to keep pushing this region forward. But then I also understand that people who are the first-time voters, which is not so far from me, I hope, and I also understand what they are looking for as well, because the sentiment of the era is very different from people who are 20 years older than me and 20 years younger than me. So because of that, I feel like that's the kind of the leader that the world needs at the moment, and that's what I strive to be. I'm not perfect yet, but that's what I strive to be, the consensus of, the new consensus for the new normal of the people.
One of the reasons why we ask what's your definition of a good leader is when the leadership that rose to power today, definitely they have gone through these campaigns, and they had to, of course, like you said, they have to have these transactions and so on, and sometimes to a point where they no longer have the autonomy to make decisions, and they're no longer serving the people, but serving a master, or master with the S, masters. And the younger generation also, you said how many questions coming, such as how to form a political party and how much does it cost to run. But really, if we decide to run today, let's say some half of this room, let's say they want to run for office and make themselves a candidate, what they think of would be definitely, can I maintain my autonomy with this deeply, I think, manipulated system in a way. Yeah.
So the answer to that is your campaign finance. After that, it's called the campaign management. It has to be a lean campaign management so that your campaign finance is also lean. And that's why you don't need to get big grants from big corporates that can call you, right before you vote in the National Assembly. And what I call how we came about the campaign management is precision politics. We use a lot of data, we use a lot of technology that allows us to survive on average donation of about $15. So it's all based from taxpayers' money. We do some merchandising. We do a lot of party membership grassroots, which is about $70. So either because of that, we didn't use a lot of money. My competitor said, if you run elections for 100 times, it wouldn't be the same cost that I spent. So because of that, precision, that kind of data-driven, that the incumbents or the older politicians or the older competitor party wouldn't know how to do, we do know how to do it. So that's why we owe no one nothing. And when you owe no one nothing, that means you are a very happy politician, because it's such a glum and gruesome occupation is to be a politician that has to listen to someone else and cannot vote your conscience. And I think that's something that is the worst job in the world, I guess. So because of the way we manage the campaigns and things like that, that's why we were able to maintain a political autonomy for the time during that. I think that's also the reason why they are really scared of us, because we're ready for elections any day. If there's a snap election tomorrow, we're ready. But for them, they have to raise funds first, right? And then because we we answer to nobody, and that's why they felt like there's no leash. It's a long leash to get us back in. Maybe the military or the monopolies were not were a bit paranoid about us.
I'll open the floor for questions in a moment, but so prepare your questions. My last question. meritocracy and democracy oftentimes being seen as two elements that are difficult to merge, especially with the system highly manipulated. Yes, we need to scale up, we need to level up in terms of finance management and so on and so forth if they run. But the mood here in Indonesia is we see appointed leaders, say, not up to standard or are not having the capability and the quality that we expect them to be. And those are happening because many speculate that there are political transactions to be fulfilled because they help, let's say, during the campaign or so on and so forth. How would you explain to us the way to actualize meritocracy in a democracy, in a vibrant democracy?
So how do you keep the appointed accountable? Is that it? Can you elaborate your question again?
I'll give one story. Yeah. So we had this youth-to-youth dialogues with the German, and we talk about democracy in each of the country. And in Germany, for someone coming from nobody to some leader, in a minister or as a parliamentarian, it's already normal that they don't talk about it. But here in Indonesia, from nobody to somebody, they talk about it as if it's very rare and very, wow, it's such an achievement when it's supposed to be a normal thing that anyone can run and anyone can be a leader as long as they have the quality and they have the effort and they have the capability and the credibility. But we see that it's not happening here.
I see. So barrier to entry? Barrier to entry politics for someone with
and eventually
a common
good
last
leadership.
name might not be able to enter politics.
That's one thing, and eventually good leadership of the government in general.
I think that there's a structural issue there, especially happening in ASEAN. Back in the days, with probably when I was young and ambassador's time, there's dynastic politics and proxy leadership, things like this. You know, with the Bush, with the Trudeau, with the Abe, and things with the Kennedys. That was also something that was going on around the world. But apparently, it's becoming quite popular over here in Southeast Asia. Whether it's the Philippines, whether it's Thailand, whether it's Indonesia, whether it's Laos, even, you know. So I feel like that's really part of my mission back at Harvard when I want to groom next-gen leaders so that they can run for office without breaking their bank account or compromise their values. And I think it's really also within our control. There's some parts that is out of our control. It might take a collective effort to fix it, like maybe constitution or the electoral laws and things like that. But it's really within our control in the sense that if we learn our political identity, asking questions such as why I want to run for office, and why for this political party, and why now is the time and not next time. You know, those are the things that will become your stump speech. It will become your political identity that says that, you know, my name is this, I want to run for office because I want to change this, and I want to run for this party because this party aligns with me, and now I'm ready because of so on and so on, you know. And once you have that identity, you'll be able to communicate very effectively. You'll be able to raise some funds very easily also in this opening environment nowadays, unlike 40 years ago, for example. So there's something within your control to, you know, go over the barrier. And I think there's many institutions around this region, as well as in Japan, in Korea, in America, that is willing to provide you the pathway to politics and have that kind of like future candidates program. At least I'm one. I mean, that's how I spend my time with someone who wants to be a mayor in Japan. Comes with, you know, okay, you and me, we craft the campaign strategy together. So how many people in your district? If you look at the previous count, where is the strong base? What's your average age of this town? Yeah, are they more farmers or they're more agriculture? Where do you prioritize? Who is a potential donor for your campaigns? Those are the things that are within control. But if you don't even know because there's lots of times people who want to run for public office is just because of that prestige that you have. That will die down very, very quickly, you know. But if you know exactly why you want to run for public office, you want to run because you think Indonesia can and you can. And once you do that, you want to get rid of corruption, or you want to introduce clean coal, or you want to introduce green climate crisis, or take care of the transboundary pollution. I mean, it's so clear that you wanted to do something with your power when you do a communication strategy, when you do a fundraising strategy, when you do a volunteer management strategy. The articulation is clear, and then it becomes possible. But if you keep saying, you know, it's within this countries, if you don't have a certain last name of, you know, dynastic politics, you know, it's going to be very hard for you to do it. Then yeah, it's going to be like that, because the world is not fair. There's always a structural barrier, but there's some behavioral amendment of yourself that you can finally, you know, step up and finally climb over. You know, and our party in Thailand is very clear. 152 MPs, you know, without you know, prominent last names, or without any big bank accounts. Maybe several of them well off from their parents, but majority, it could be a Grab driver. We have one, and we have one who's a laborer in a textile company. We have one that is indigenous people up in Chiang Mai, and they become MPs. Yeah, so we figured it out pretty much, and I'm very happy to help you guys if you want to.
I think we also do have angkot driver, for instance. Okay, I'll open the floor for questions. I'll give the first opportunity for Ambassador Sumadi.
Thank you very much for the privilege, Jenny. I have two questions, very basic question. One is, in any country you have government or leaders and the people. In the democratic country, the people has a right, but right has always entailed responsibility. My question is, what is the responsibility of the people in a democratic country? This is one. And the second is that you call it democracy, but the manifestation, either it legally, institutionally, are different in any countries. May I know your opinion on the prerequisite, the conditio sine qua non, for a political system to be called democratic? Thank you.
The second part of the question is freedom, liberty, and fraternity, to begin with, in order for you to become democratic. And the responsibility of the people is definitely keep your representative accountable. So go out to vote is something that is very important. It's not always the case, because if you look at the overall voting turnout around the world, it's dropping like crazy. From average of about 65% global voting turnout, last year it went down to about 50-something. And if you look at Britain, if you look at Japan, you know, even developing countries or developed countries, the voting turnout is lower and lower and lower. In Thailand, during my case, we won because it was the highest voting turnout in the history of Thailand, 78%. So if people felt like they have to use their rights and keep the government accountable through democratic means, that's essentially the role of the citizen. Obviously, you have to be happy, work hard, and pay taxes, but the trust of the government that returns to the people, that they feel comfortable, that they want to be part of the contribution to the country fiscal space, is also something that is very important as well. How about we take 3 rounds?
Yes,
rounds of
questions. Yeah?
What time do we finish?
Team? 3:30 is the time for ending the session.
ดูคลิปจบแล้วอย่าลืมกดไลค์กดแชร์กดติดตามกดกระดิ่งให้ด้วยนะครับ